Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. So quick before I start, who here is kind of in the OT sector? Has some OT? Yeah, there's a couple here. Usually I'm the odd one out. So it's great to see there's some advocates here with me. So I'm going to talk about bridging the IT-OT skills gaps. I think if you're in OT, you know that skills gap is enormous. So I'm going to try to give a few pointers about how we could start to bridge those. I work at Immersive, formerly Immersive Labs. So, but I'm not really going to go on about what we do. There is a stand here, so if you want to have a chat, you can come to talk to us. So I'm going to kind of talk about the urgency. Why do we need to think about security for OT? Why should everybody care? Kind of what are the dividers that I've seen exist? And how can we then work on building that unified defense? So for anybody that's not in OT, when I say OT or operation technology, I talk about the systems that bridge the physical and cyber worlds. So for example, in a water treatment plant, they're used, can open valves, start pumps, nuclear power stations, manufacturing to make your assembly bells roll. So it's all of those cool systems that have a bit of a unique aspect to it. So what are we seeing in the OT sphere? We see an increasing amount of cyber threats. So we can see ransomware popping up that mainly impacts OT because it impacts the IT environment supporting it. But we kind of see step by step more OT ransomware coming. We see lots of nation state attacks. Like you could only the other day, when Portugal and Spain had a massive outage, there was already some talks about, could this have been a cyber attack? It wasn't, but we have seen in past that it could, cyber attacks have been shown to turn off the light. Supply chain vulnerabilities is also something that I think the IT people also understand. We see mainly the growing cyber threats because of a growing attack surface. So we see an increased digital transformation. So before, these systems were very neatly in their own little world. They had a massive air gap, we call it, between the IT network and the OT network. But now, like with everything, it needs to be more digital. It needs to work more efficiently. Instead of having 5 engineers at every site, now we want one central monitoring place that has, it's cheaper to run. It's all about the business, all about the money, really. We also see lots of regulatory and compliance happening. NIS2, massive thing. DORA. We see CISO in the US also focusing it. So there's a lot of push to security. And how dire the shortage is of IT security professionals. For every one IT security professional, there is maybe 0.1 OT security professional, so it is even more dire as well. So if anybody wants to swap, do it. In 2024, 73% of OT professionals saw an intrusion that impacted their systems. That's an impressive, it's a significant amount. It is scary, 73%. So who knows what effect that could have? If that was your local power station, it could affect you. If that was your local water treatment plant, we saw that happening in Florida, where they almost managed to put more don't think it was chlorine, where they were changing kind of the chemicals in the water treatment plant, which could actually have, an effect, or maybe everybody is drinking sewage water. And there's also a statement there, as regulatory obligations require public disclosure, reputational effects can also be unavoidable. So even here we talk about that reputation, but it's a bit different because we all know kind of in the UK, you don't really choose where your water comes from. You don't really choose who your power network operator is. You choose who supplies you the electricity, but there's so many things kind of you don't have, power over. If you look at kind of some attacks that we saw Black Energy, the Ukraine power stations, Russia state actor, we saw Triton, which actually affected safety systems. So aside from the operational systems, we also have safety systems that kind of sit there as an engineering backup fail-safe. So that was kind of the first attack we saw targeting those machines. We have NotPetya, which was ransomware used to affect OT, and we have the colonial pipeline. So pipelines, oil pipelines, also very important for basically society to function. And of course, like everybody knows Stuxnet, like the old, true, and perfect example back from 2007. So it's kind of been a long time. We also, going back to kind of nation-state actors, Sandworm or Voodoo Bear or, Russia, let's say it, shows a level of ferocity that's kind of unprecedented. So we're kind of talking about cyber warfare, and we see it a lot now with the war in Ukraine. More and more focus on these operational environments because they serve so many more purposes than just kind of espionage or, just general a nuisance, but they can actually turn things down. And if you can turn things down, that's so much easier for your military, for example. If they have no electricity, you might not be able to operate certain systems that monitor for intrusions. If their satellites go down, you might lose visibility in the field of battle. So there's a lot of things that we can that they can use OT for. If you look at kind of the cyber attacks we see a lot of the attacks nowadays are coming from like IT TTPs. Only a couple are OT TCPs, but we kind of see them advancing and increasing. So whereas we are used to see IT affects the OT, we now see more and more people focusing on the OT. I think in the Dragos report, they see more and more hacktivists kind of preparing to attack OT environments. I know in the UK there's a lot of training that is happening every year to kind of combat that threat and kind of how to operate that. Mainly in the nuclear sector, there's a lot of focus on that as well. So there's a lot of adversaries that are looking at it. I think it's like, was it the criminal, 81% criminal. So, criminals see an opportunity here. It's, you're gonna tell it later, but the cost of downtime is so enormous that criminals see that as a very lucrative opportunity. We've seen an 87% increase of ransomware targeting OT ICS infrastructure compared to 2023. So again, almost double, and it's not stopping, it's only increasing. So the assumption that many people in this sector have, we won't be targeted, it is, we are secure, we are separated, is not true. You'd be surprised, lots of the people in these environments don't even know what assets they have. They might have an asset that has been there for 10 years, nobody knows. Somebody might has a team viewer that they use to do a bit of activity on. There's so much visibility that is lacking in these environments as well. Like I said, cost of downtime could go from $4,000 a minute to $4,150 K a minute of downtime costs. So if you hit with this, that is something that ransomware people and criminals are like, wow. But as a CISO, as somebody responsible for OT cybersecurity, this is kind of your, greatest nightmare. If you cost a company $60 million, $2 million a day, if your whole environment is shut down. And given the regulation, if you're in critical infrastructure, you might be required to shut down for several days or weeks just because the government says so. Even if it's not like a big impact, it could have a cascading effect. So OT security shouldn't be and should never really have been just an air gap. So we should look at network segregation, that air gapping, definitely, but we should have the monitoring systems in place. We should have incident response teams trained to operate in these environments, understand these environments. We should look at our supply chain. How can we secure those? How can we secure systems that have been produced since 30 years ago and still being produced without authentication, without protocols that support encryption or authentication? And how do we do governance and compliance? And if you look at all of these things, it's not so different from IT at first sight, but if you kind of delve down deep into it, you kind of see there are some crucial differences. So I kind of picked three main dividers that I've seen to kind of structure this a little bit more. So the first one is cultural, the second one is technical, and the third one is training, which I think is a very important point. And we always have to upskill and train ourselves. So if we look at culture, we see lots of different priorities and different cultures in general. So everybody knows the CIA triad, tried and tested. In OT, we don't really use it, but it is useful for IT people to kind of give them a notion of it. So if we look at the CIA triad, we would have availability firmly on number one. Our systems have to be available. It shouldn't go down. We need that visibility. Integrity confidentiality is of importance, but less. Because if once we lose that availability, cascading effects, and we kind of don't know where it ends. If you have a vulnerability that pops up, what do you do in IT? You can take your system down, you can put a patch in, all done and dusted, you're safe and secure. In OT, you can, it can take days for you to shut down your facility, to then apply a patch, to then power it back up again, and you're never even sure if the patch is going to work, if your systems will reboot again. So it's not a thing of immediate patching. It's thoroughly planned, and it can take months or even never. Like we have 3 patching cycles: patch now, which is not really used, patch later, and patch never. And I don't think in IT there's much patch nevers, because it is so easy to do, but not in OT. If you see something happening in IT, what do? You say, we contain, we disconnect the machine, do our incident response procedures. In OT, if I disconnect my PLC, my operations are impacted. The valve might not be operated. I might be relying on my safety systems. I cannot just rip out my systems because I risk safety. And that's another thing, like we don't look at financial values, we look at risk to human lives. If we look at the system itself, 3 to 5 year lifespan, Windows updates more than ever nowadays, even though they said Windows 10 or 11 was going to be the latest version. But we have systems that have been running for decades. Siemens, one of the biggest manufacturers, have been making the same PLCs, programmable logic controllers, for the past 20, 30 years. They tried to stop, but people were like, oh yeah, but I use that one, so can you make it, keep making it? So instead of updating from what is an S7 300 to an S7 1200 or 1500, that's not as easy because those might not work with the rest of your facility, so they just swap out and you keep, even if you have a new system, it's still an old system. And security leadership is also a clear one. Like you have a CISO, you know who's responsible. Who is responsible for security? The CISO. The buck stops there. But in OT, you have so many different hands that are doing something about security. Is a CISO responsible for only the IT security? Is it the engineers that do the OT security? Some companies operate completely different than other companies, so it's not always very clear, it's very distributed. So who takes responsibility? Is it facility per facility? Is it company-wide? Sometimes it's not really known. Technology-wise, that's the trusty S7 300. It looks old and it is old. There is Modbus TCP instead of, for example, using HTTP. That's a protocol we use. Doesn't support encryption, doesn't support authentication. If I get into the factory network, I can use it to turn a lamp on or off, to turn a pump on or off. I can do anything with it from any machine. These symbols here is our Python version, that's called ladder logic. So we use that to operate those machines based on this input, set this output. We can go very complex. We can send emails, we can set up a TCP server, we can do lots of things with it, but it is a very old kind of programming language. And I think, I'm even old enough to know what that icon is from. That's Windows XP. That is also still used. Windows Embedded is all still used in our facilities, mainly because we cannot upgrade from those. So compare that to your latest EDR, to your cloud environments, to JavaScript, to all of these cool new technologies you can play with. Every day something new pops up. That's not it. Training-wise, If you look at IT security training, you're looking at your cyber threats, data protection, network, system vulnerabilities. You can do regular updates. You can do simulations. You can do penetration testing, incident response. You have lots of standards and controls to help you with that. You're looking at data breaches, regulatory fines, a financial thing. If you look at OT, we are thinking about physical safety and continuity of our process. We are thinking about what are our legacy systems, what are they vulnerable to, and how can we make a little wall around them? How can we patch them without patching them? We need hands-on and real-world scenarios because every single facility is different. I can make a training for a water facility, but an energy facility is different. They slightly have different network structures. They have some different systems. The emphasis is on process safety, risk assessment, and mitigation. It's not just on updating. If we look at standards, there are some standards. IEC 62443 is the most popular one. There's some industry-specific standards, lots of them in the nuclear sector, but it's not as widespread. There is no document that I can download, like from CIS or the cybersecurity agency in France, ANSSI, that says this is how you can set up a safe, secure Windows machine. We think about not data breaches and reputational damage, but we think about production halts, safety incidents, potential physical damage to your systems. Might I put human lives at risk? So it's like a whole different kind of focus on the training. That is, if you just come from an IT security environment and you come in and you force things upon your OT personnel, it doesn't work because that language barrier is there. So how do we kind of try to combat that? So we need to upskill our workforce, our cyber workforce, but also everybody just in the company. So we think about your security teams, think about your OT teams, think about the management. It's so important for these teams to have manager buy-in from both sides. If I go to an organization and I have buy-in from the security leadership, but not from the OT leadership, not much I can do, but to try to bridge that gap. So we need to look at kind of role-based training. What does an OT security engineer need to know? Do I need to have an OT security engineer in my OT team? Do I need to have a security champion? My SOC analyst, they are now looking at logs from my operational environment. They don't see they will see HTTP, but they don't see the protocols and the system they're used to. So I need to train and upskill them to understand what they're seeing, what is correct, what is malicious. Lots of the industry best, Nozomi networks, Dragos, they have all of their fancy IDSs for OT, but they don't really work because it's such a nuanced field. Like one system talks with another system, and if there is suddenly a spike that could be explained by something else, like we just had one of the IDSs run in the network, and we just blasted one of our PLCs with get and put requests to get information from the memory, which is also directly addressable. And they just say, it's fine, because I know this system and I know that system. But we all know in IT, it's not because it's a system that you've seen before that it's trustworthy. So we need to look at ranges, simulation, we need to prepare and train for any incidents that are happening. And gamification and hands-on is so important in these environments. And also big cyber exercises. If something happens in OT, everyone is involved. Legal, management, IT, PR. There's so much that needs to be in place. And if you just see, it's MNS, they were on point with their PR. The CEO was there to calm things down. They did it perfect, but they still had a massive hit as well to their stock price. So if you look at the nice OT cybersecurity engineer role, we see there's a lot of knowledge of industry standards, safety systems, OT compliance, risk tolerance level, Purdue model, which is kind of our network model that we have, different layers, different zones. So if you do cybersecurity and OT, if you have someone like this, they have to understand the physical process. Because if they don't do that, then they're not an OT cybersecurity engineer. So they have to work on develop architectures, they have to understand the risk and vulnerability, they have to asset management, inventory model, very, very crucial. So it's about the bridging of the gaps. So when they work with CISOs, plant managers, OT technicians, they work across both worlds. So there's a lot of training barriers. For example, there is no budget for OT-specific training. There is some free training available. I think CISA has some. I think the NCSC runs some as well. But that's not really an excuse. You have to have it. So you have to kind of get that buy-in. Our teams don't collaborate. You have to make them. So you have to run those joint exercises. You have to kind of get them to talk to each other, understand what each other is saying. A big one that I think I spoke with some IT people here, it's similar there. Like, you cannot always take time away from your day job. With engineers as well, they're constantly working to make sure that the system doesn't go down, that the safety is guaranteed. But they have to, spend time on security as well. So bite-sized, on-demand learning modules. Or these systems are too specialized. That's a big one. Every OT engineer thinks they're completely unique, which in a way is true. Nobody will have the exact same network setup and systems, but there is overlap that you can start with for sure. And OT training is not as available as IT training, which is true. This is kind of a little call to anybody in OT. Let's make some good OT training. Let's ensure that we work together, because I don't think in the OT security space we don't really competitors. We all can benefit for security. So if you want to build your IT/OT cybersecurity roadmap, look at cross-functional IT/OT cyber teams, do hands-on drilling, culture of continuous learning, keep upskilling, keep up to date with your knowledge, and change your organizational culture. So I know everybody here has to talk about return on investment, so I put this slide in specifically for the CISOs and the CIOs. So the Boston Beer Company has seen 100% return on investment the first year of their investment in OT cybersecurity. 15% reduction in insurance premiums and a 300% increase in suspicious email reporting. Cisco did a case study with a manufacturing firm, and they saw they can contain ransomware within 45 minutes. They saved $750,000 in direct costs because of that, and estimated 1.2 million in indirect costs. There's a 300% ROI. And the Ponemon Institute said that there's key benefits. So 400% ROI they saw, lower incident response cost, reduced downtime, improved compliance as well, which is a big one. So we don't need to hide behind a barrier. We need to integrate with IT. We are not on our island anymore. So focus on the command structure, focus on the cross-training, focus on compatible defenses. Make sure that you don't have two distinct systems to use in your OT environment if you can, because that creates more barriers and more kind of problems in the languages have been spoken. So what can you do? You start with focusing on understanding the threat landscape, recognize that it's a prime target, and learn from real-world case studies. Identify your organizational gaps. Where can I build my culture? Where can I, start the discussion going, start the ball rolling? Build that unified defense, so establish cross-functional teams, get people to talk to each other, foster a culture that focuses on resilience, so create security champions in your team environment, promote learning, give opportunities to learn, and embed security also in your organizational structure and priorities. And the best place to start is start small and start smart, scale smart. So do bite-sized things. Start with understanding your assets. Start by just getting a conversation rolling, and then eventually you'll see that these conversations will last and just increase. Okay, that's it. That's all I had. I hope it's useful. I will be here all day, so if you want to have a chat with me. Okay, I think we're out of time. So thank you for coming.